I should have known better than to trust her. My name is Heidi, and I'm about to tell you how my mother-in-law destroyed my life with a smile on her face and a pen in her hand. But first, let me take you back to when I thought she was my biggest supporter. Heidi, darling, you absolutely must apply for the Pemberton Fellowship, Harmony said, setting down her wine glass with that decisive clink that meant she'd made up her mind about something. It's perfect for someone with your academic background. We were sitting in her pristine dining room, the kind where every piece of furniture cost more than my car. Bobby squeezed my hand under the table, beaming with pride. Even after 2 years of marriage, he still got that look whenever his mother praised me. I don't know, I said, twisting my wedding ring. The competition is insane. They only take 12 people worldwide. Nonsense. Harmony leaned forward, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany table. You graduated summa cum laude. Your thesis on international development policy was groundbreaking. I've seen the caliber of students who get these fellowships, and you're better than half of them. Coming from anyone else, I might have rolled my eyes. But Harmony wasn't just anyone. She was Dean of Academic Affairs at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. When she said something about academic merit, people listened. The application deadline is in 3 weeks, I said, already feeling that familiar flutter of possibility in my chest. Then we'd better get started. Harmony stood up, smoothing her silk blouse. I'll write your recommendation letter personally. With my endorsement, you'll be a shoo-in. Bobby's younger brother, Taylor, looked up from his phone. That's so cool, Heidi. You're like going to be famous or something. Don't be ridiculous, Taylor, Paige said, not looking up from cutting her salmon into precise, identical pieces. It's just a fellowship. Just a fellowship? Bobby laughed. Paige, this would set Heidi up for life. She could work anywhere in the world after this. Paige's fork paused mid-air. Well, I suppose that depends on what you consider important. Some people value stability and family over gallivanting around the globe. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. I felt Bobby tense beside me. Paige, Harmony's voice carried a warning. What? I'm just saying there are different priorities in life. Some people are content building something meaningful at home instead of chasing every shiny opportunity that comes along. The Pemberton Fellowship isn't just any opportunity, I said, trying to keep my voice level. It's a chance to work with the UN on sustainable development initiatives, the kind of work that actually changes lives. Of course, dear. Paige smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure it's very important work. I just think it's wonderful when couples can build their careers together in the same place. But that's just me. Enough, Harmony said sharply. Heidi, ignore your sister-in-law. She's being provincial. This fellowship is exactly what you need to take your career to the next level. The rest of dinner passed in relative peace, but I caught Paige shooting me looks when she thought I wasn't paying attention. After dessert, Harmony pulled me aside in the kitchen. Don't let Paige get to you, she said, loading plates into the dishwasher with mechanical precision. She's always been jealous of ambitious women. It's why she's stuck in that dead-end marketing job. I don't want to cause problems in the family. You're not causing anything. You're pursuing excellence, which is exactly what you should be doing. Harmony turned to face me, her expression intense. Heidi, I see something special in you, something that shouldn't be wasted. Let me help you reach your potential. The sincerity in her voice made my throat tight. My own mother had never spoken to me like that, never seen my dreams as anything more than impractical fantasies. Thank you, I whispered. That means everything to me. Then it settled. Send me your application materials by Friday, and I'll have the recommendation letter ready by Monday. We're going to make this happen. 3 weeks later, I submitted what I knew was the strongest application of my life. Harmony's recommendation letter was glowing. She'd shown me a draft that made me sound like the next Nobel laureate. Bobby took me out to celebrate, convinced we'd be planning my move to Geneva within months. The rejection email arrived on a Tuesday morning, And it didn't just crush my dreams, it obliterated them. We regret to inform you that your application has been denied due to serious concerns regarding your character and professional integrity. I read those words 5 times before they sank in. Character concerns, professional integrity. What the hell was happening? I called Bobby first, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They rejected me, I said the moment he picked up. But Bobby, they're saying there are character concerns. Character concerns. What does that even mean? Slow down, babe. What exactly did the email say? I read him the whole thing, my voice cracking on every word. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. That's insane, he finally said. There has to be some mistake. You're the most ethical person I know. I need to see my application file. I need to know what they're talking about. Of course. We'll figure this out together, okay? Maybe someone mixed up your file with someone else's. But even as he said it, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I called Alyssa next. She'd been my closest friend since grad school and now worked in university admissions. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. Holy shit, Heidi, she said after I explained everything. Character concerns? That's not language they use lightly. Someone must have written something really damaging. But who would do that? My professors love me. My references were all positive. Wait, who wrote your letters of recommendation? Professor Martinez from my master's program, Dr. Kim from my thesis committee, and Harmony. Alyssa was quiet for a moment. Heidi, you need to request your full application file. Like, immediately. Something's not right here. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with the fellowship committee, being transferred from one person to another. Finally, a tired-sounding administrator told me they couldn't release application materials due to confidentiality agreements with recommenders. But it's my application, I said. How can I not see my own file? I'm sorry, but that's our policy. The decision is final. I hung up and screamed into a pillow until my throat was raw. That evening, I sat across from Harmony at another family dinner, studying her face for any sign of, what, guilt, satisfaction? But she looked exactly the same as always, composed, elegant, slightly bored by the conversation happening around her. I heard about the fellowship, she said when Bobby stepped away to help Taylor with homework. I'm so sorry, dear. These committees can be terribly political. They mentioned character concerns, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Do you have any idea what that could mean? Harmony's expression didn't change. Character concerns? How odd. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding about your academic record? Or maybe they confused you with another candidate? Maybe. I took a sip of wine, trying to calm my nerves. I just wish I could see what they're basing this on. Well, these things happen for a reason, Harmony said, cutting into her chicken with surgical precision. Perhaps it's time to focus on what really matters, supporting Bobby, building a stable life here. Not everyone is meant for international careers. The words hit me like a slap. What do you mean by that? Nothing negative, of course. It's just that some people are better suited for different paths. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations. I stared at her, feeling like I was seeing her clearly for the first time. Limitations? Heidi, Bobby said, returning to the table. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I lied. After dinner, I helped Harmony clear the dishes while everyone else moved to the living room. We worked in silence until she suddenly spoke. You know, Heidi, I've been thinking about your situation. Oh? She turned to face me, and for a split second, her mask slipped. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Maybe this rejection is a blessing in disguise. Your place is here, with your husband, not gallivanting around Europe playing at being important. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but every word was razor sharp. Some people need to learn to be content with what they have instead of always reaching for more. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What are you saying? but just as quickly as it had appeared, the mask was back in place. I'm saying that everything happens for a reason, dear. Now, shall we join the others? I followed her into the living room on autopilot, my mind reeling. Bobby was laughing at something Taylor had said, completely oblivious to what had just happened in the kitchen. "You're quiet tonight," he said, pulling me down onto the couch beside him. "Just tired," I managed. But as I sat there, surrounded by his family, one thought kept echoing in my head. Harmony knew something. And whatever it was, she was glad I'd been rejected. I was going to find out what she'd done to me. And when I did, she was going to pay for it. I waited 3 days before calling Zane. He was Bobby's friend from college, worked in IT at the university, and had always been kind to me. More importantly, he'd seen enough of Harmony's behavior at family gatherings to know she wasn't the saint everyone thought she was. "Heidi, what's up?" His voice was cautious when he answered. "I need a favor, a big one." "Okay, what kind of favor?" I took a deep breath. "I need you to help me get a copy of something from the university system. Something I should have access to, but they're blocking me from seeing." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed. "This is about the fellowship rejection, isn't it?" "How did you—" "Bobby mentioned it. Look, Heidi, I can't just hack into confidential files. I could lose my job." "I'm not asking you to hack anything. I just need you to help me access my own application materials. They're stonewalling me, and I think someone wrote something terrible about me." "Who would do that?" I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud yet. "I don't know. That's what I need to find out." Another long pause. "Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at lunch. And Heidi, don't tell anyone about this conversation." The next day, Zane looked nervous as he slid into the booth across from me. He kept glancing around like he expected campus security to burst through the door. "I've been thinking about this all night," he said. "If I do this and get caught, it's not just my job on the line. It's criminal charges. I understand. But Zane, someone destroyed my reputation and I don't even know what they said about me. How is that fair?" He studied my face for a long moment. "You really think someone sabotaged you?" "I know it sounds paranoid, but yes. The language in that rejection letter, it wasn't about my qualifications. It was personal." Zane pulled out his laptop and opened it, shielding the screen from other customers. "Okay, I can't promise anything, but let me see what I can do. What's your student ID number?" I rattled it off, my heart pounding as he typed. After what felt like forever, he turned the screen toward me. "I found your file. The recommendation letters are here, but they're password protected. I can download them, but once I do this, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to know?" My mouth was dry. "Yes." He clicked a few more keys, then closed the laptop. "I'll email these to you from a secure account. Check your messages in an hour." "Zane, thank you. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything. Just be careful with whatever you find, okay?" That hour was the longest of my life. When the email finally came, I stared at the attachment for 5 full minutes before opening it. There were 3 files, one from each of my recommenders. Professor Martinez's letter was glowing, just as I'd expected. Dr. Kim's was equally positive. Then I opened the 3rd file. The letter was from Harmony, but it wasn't the one she'd shown me. This one was a masterpiece of character assassination disguised as professional concern. While Ms. Heidi possesses adequate academic credentials, I have serious reservations about her character and professional integrity. During our association, I have observed troubling patterns of dishonesty, manipulation, and a concerning willingness to compromise ethical standards for personal gain. The letter went on for 2 pages, painting me as a manipulative liar who couldn't be trusted with any position of responsibility. Every sentence was carefully crafted to sound professional while being utterly devastating. I read it 3 times before the full impact hit me. This wasn't just sabotage, it was character murder. My phone rang. Bobby. "Hey babe, how was your day?" "Fine," I said, my voice sounding strange even to me. "You sure? You sound weird." I'm just tired, long day. Well, get some rest. Mom invited us for dinner tomorrow night. She's making that pasta dish you like. After I hung up, I sat staring at the letter until the words blurred together. Then I called Alyssa. She destroyed me, I said without preamble when she answered. What? Who? Harmony. I got a copy of her recommendation letter. Alyssa, she called me dishonest and manipulative. She said I have no professional integrity. Jesus Christ, are you sure it's really from her? It has her digital signature, her university letterhead, everything. But here's the thing, she showed me a completely different letter before I submitted my application, a glowing one. That bitch wrote 2 letters? She played me perfectly, made me think she was supporting me while she was stabbing me in the back. Alyssa was quiet for a moment. Heidi, this is bigger than just the fellowship. If she sent this to other places, my blood ran cold. What do you mean? Recommendation letters don't just disappear. They get filed, shared, referenced. If she's been bad-mouthing you to other institutions, I felt sick. How do I find out? You need to contact every place that might have received information about you. Graduate programs, job applications, anything where her opinion might carry weight. I spent the next 2 hours making calls. By the end, I had my answer. Harmony's poison had spread far beyond the fellowship committee. She'd sent versions of that letter to 3 other institutions I'd applied to over the past year. I'd been blacklisted, and I hadn't even known it. The scope of Harmony's sabotage hit me like a freight train. 3 other institutions. 3 other opportunities she'd poisoned with her lies. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by printed emails, phone records, and notes, building my case like I was preparing for war, because that's exactly what this was. You need to report her, Alyssa said over video chat, her face serious on my laptop screen. This isn't just personal vendetta territory anymore. This is professional misconduct on a massive scale. Report her to who? She's a dean, Alyssa. Who's going to believe me over her? The University Ethics Board. They handle this kind of thing. I laughed bitterly. Right. And who do you think sits on that board? Her colleagues? Her friends? Not all of them. Alyssa leaned closer to her camera. Remember Professor Griffin, your favorite from undergrad? The name hit me like lightning. Erin Griffin, the brilliant professor who'd inspired me to pursue international development in the first place. She'd left our university suddenly during my senior year, right after some kind of scandal. What about her? She's at State University now. Just got appointed head of their ethics board. Heidi, if anyone would understand what you're going through, it's her. I stared at Alyssa's pixelated face. What scandal? I never found out what really happened. Nobody talked about it officially, but there were rumors. Something about research funding being questioned, her integrity being challenged. Sound familiar? My hands started shaking. You think Harmony was involved? I think Harmony has a pattern, and you're not her first victim. After we hung up, I spent an hour crafting an email to Professor Griffin. I attached everything, Harmony's fake letter, the real one, documentation of the other institutions that had been contacted, and a timeline of events. My finger hovered over the send button for 10 minutes. Once I sent this, there would be no going back. I'd be declaring war on my husband's mother, potentially destroying my marriage, definitely tearing apart his family. I hit send. Professor Griffin called me 2 hours later. Heidi, I just read your email. Can you meet me tomorrow? I'm driving down to the city. You believe me? Oh, I more than believe you. I've been waiting 12 years for someone to finally expose what that woman really is. We met at a small cafe downtown. Professor Griffin looked older than I remembered, but her eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had made her lectures so captivating. Tell me everything, she said after we'd ordered coffee. I walked her through the entire story, from Harmony's initial encouragement to the devastating rejection letter. She listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. The letter she showed you versus the one she actually sent, she said finally. Do you still have both? I have screenshots of the fake one she showed me, and Zane got me the real one from the system. Zane could get in serious trouble for that. I know. But Professor Griffin, what she did to me, she's done it before, hasn't she? To you? Her jaw tightened. 12 years ago, I was up for a major research grant. Harmony was on the review committee. She seemed supportive, even helped me refine my proposal. Then suddenly questions arose about my previous work. Allegations of data manipulation that were completely fabricated. What happened? I couldn't prove she was behind it, but I knew. The investigation dragged on for months. Even though I was eventually cleared, the damage was done. My reputation was shot. My funding dried up. I had to leave. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry. Because now we have a chance to stop her from doing this to anyone else. She leaned forward. Heidi, I need you to understand something. If we pursue this, it's going to get ugly. Harmony will fight back with everything she has. She already destroyed my career. What else can she do to me? She can destroy your marriage, your relationships with Bobby's family. She can make your life hell in ways you haven't even imagined yet. I thought about Bobby, about how devastated he'd be when he learned the truth about his mother, about Taylor, who looked up to me, about the family dinners that would never be the same. She made her choice when she decided to destroy me, I said. Now I'm making mine. Professor Griffin smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. Good, because I've been documenting Harmony's behavior for years, waiting for the right moment. You just gave it to me. She pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. I've kept records of every questionable decision she's made, every career she's derailed, every student who's come to me with stories similar to yours. We're not just going after her for what she did to you, Heidi. We're going after her for all of it. I stared at the folder, realizing I wasn't alone in this fight. How many others? At least 8 that I can prove. Probably more who were too scared to come forward. What do we do now? Now we file a formal complaint with the University Ethics Board, and then we watch Harmony's world burn. The university moved faster than I expected. Within a week of filing the complaint, Harmony received a formal notice that she was under investigation. I knew because Bobby came home that night looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Mom got called into a meeting with the ethics board, he said, slumping onto our couch. They're investigating her for professional misconduct. I kept my face neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of misconduct? Something about recommendation letters. She thinks it's politically motivated. You know how cutthroat academia can be. I'm sure it'll work out, I said, hating how easily the lie rolled off my tongue. Bobby looked at me with those trusting eyes that had made me fall in love with him. She asked if you might know anything about it. Apparently, your name came up in the complaint. My name? She thinks maybe you're being used as a pawn by someone with a grudge against her. She's worried about you, babe. I almost laughed at the audacity. Even while under investigation, Harmony was spinning herself as the victim and me as the naive fool being manipulated by her enemies. I should probably call her, I said. Make sure she knows I support her. The next morning, I dialed Harmony's number. She answered on the first ring. Heidi, darling, I'm so glad you called. I assume Bobby told you about this ridiculous investigation? He did. I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's clearly a witch hunt orchestrated by my enemies, but I'm not worried. The truth always comes out. Her voice was smooth as silk, but I could hear the steel underneath. I do hope you'll be willing to speak on my behalf if needed. Your testimony about our positive relationship would be very helpful. Of course, I said, anything I can do to help. Wonderful. I knew I could count on you. After I hung up, I felt sick. She was so confident, so sure she could manipulate everyone around her. Even now, she thought she had me under her thumb. That afternoon, Paige called. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Can you meet me for coffee? I found her at a Starbucks near her office, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know you filed that complaint against Mom. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Heidi. I've known my mother my entire life. I know how she operates, and I know what she's capable of. Paige leaned across the small table. The question is, do you have any idea what you've unleashed? She destroyed my career, Paige. She lied about me to multiple institutions. I know. The admission hit me like a slap. I've known for years that she does this to people who threaten her or don't fit into her perfect vision of how things should be. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Because she's my mother. Paige's voice cracked. Because I was scared of what would happen if I crossed her. Because I'm a coward, okay? We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession hanging between us. She's going to destroy you for this, Paige said quietly. She's already started digging into your past, looking for anything she can use against you. She's calling in favors, spreading rumors, poisoning wells you don't even know exist yet. Let her try. I have evidence. Evidence won't matter if no one's willing to listen to it, and Mom has a lot of friends in high places. Not all of them. Paige studied my face. You have someone on the inside, don't you? Someone she can't touch. I didn't answer, but my expression must have given me away. Jesus, Heidi, you really think you can win this? I think she's gotten away with ruining people's lives for too long. And what about Bobby? What about Taylor? What about our family? What about all the people she's destroyed over the years? Don't they matter? Paige's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and paled. She wants to see me, right now. Paige, don't. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. She stood up, gathering her purse. I can't protect you from what's coming, but I can give you one piece of advice. Watch your back. Mom doesn't just destroy careers, she destroys lives. That evening, Bobby was unusually quiet during dinner. Finally, he set down his fork and looked at me. Mom wants to have a family meeting tomorrow night. She says there are some things we need to discuss about this investigation. What kind of things? She wouldn't say. But Heidi, he reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever happens, we'll get through it together, okay? I squeezed his hand, knowing it might be one of the last times he'd look at me with such trust and love. Together, I agreed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop now or I'll make sure you lose everything that matters to you. This is your only warning. H. I deleted the message and smiled. Game on, Harmony. The family meeting was set for Sunday dinner, but Professor Griffin called me that morning with news that changed everything. The investigation committee wants to interview you tomorrow, she said. But Heidi, there's something else. We found more victims. How many more? 6 additional cases we can substantiate. Students, junior faculty, even a visiting researcher from Germany. Harmony has been systematically destroying careers for over a decade. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. 12 years of this? At least. And here's the kicker. She kept files, detailed records of everyone she considered a threat to the university's reputation or her own position. Files? Digital records, correspondence, even personal information she gathered on people. The IT department found them during their investigation. Heidi, your name is in there, along with detailed notes about your marriage to Bobby, your academic history, even your financial situation. My hands started shaking. She was planning this from the beginning. It looks that way, but there's more. Paige's name is in there too. Paige, but she's her daughter. Apparently, Harmony was concerned about Paige's lack of ambition and tendency toward defiance. She has contingency plans for controlling her too. I thought about Paige's warning yesterday. her admission that she'd known about her mother's behavior, but stayed silent out of fear. Professor Griffin, what happens now? Now we present everything to the full ethics board. With this much evidence, there's no way they can ignore it or sweep it under the rug. After we hung up, I stared at my phone, dreading the evening ahead. Bobby would be expecting me at his mother's house in a few hours, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. I arrived at Harmony's house to find the whole family already gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was tense. Taylor kept glancing between his mother and me, Paige sat rigid in her chair, and Bobby looked like he hadn't slept. Now that we're all here, Harmony began, her voice carrying that familiar authority, I want to discuss this investigation and how it affects our family. She was dressed impeccably as always, but I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for her wine glass. As you all know, I'm being targeted by individuals who want to damage my reputation and, by extension, this family's standing in the community. Mom, Taylor interrupted, what exactly are they accusing you of? Harmony's smile was razor-sharp. They're claiming I wrote negative recommendation letters about certain individuals. It's completely fabricated, of course. But why would anyone make that up? Taylor pressed. Because, darling, success breeds jealousy. There are people who resent my position, my influence, and they're using this investigation to try to bring me down. I watched Bobby's face as his mother spoke. He wanted to believe her. I could see it in his eyes, but doubt was creeping in. The problem, Harmony continued, turning her gaze directly to me, is that some people in this family might be unknowingly helping my enemies. What do you mean? Bobby asked. I mean that someone has been feeding information to the investigators. Someone with access to our family conversations, our private discussions. Her eyes never left mine. Someone who might think they're doing the right thing, but is actually being manipulated. The room went dead silent. Taylor looked confused. Paige stared at her lap, and Bobby's face went pale. Mom, are you suggesting that someone in this room... I'm not suggesting anything, Harmony said smoothly. I'm simply pointing out that the timing of this investigation is very convenient for certain people who might benefit from my downfall. That's enough. The voice came from an unexpected source. Paige. She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. Just stop it, Mom. Paige, sit down. No, I'm done sitting down. I'm done staying quiet while you destroy people. Paige turned to face the rest of us. She did it. Everything they're investigating, she did it. Harmony's mask finally slipped. You ungrateful little... I've seen the files, Mom. The ones you keep on all of us. Yes, even me. Even your own daughter isn't safe from your need to control everything and everyone. Bobby stood up slowly. What files? Ask her, Paige said, pointing at Harmony. Ask her about the detailed records she keeps on everyone she considers a threat. Ask her about the backup plans she has for controlling our lives. Those files are confidential university business, Harmony snapped, but her composure was cracking. University business? I finally spoke up. Is that what you call the file you kept on me? The one where you documented my marriage, my finances, my career goals, so you could figure out the best way to destroy me? Bobby's head whipped toward me. Heidi, what are you talking about? Your mother wrote a recommendation letter that destroyed my fellowship application and blacklisted me from other opportunities. She's been systematically ruining careers for over a decade. That's a lie, Harmony said, but her voice was shrill now. I have copies of the letters, Bobby. The fake one she showed me and the real one she sent. I have documentation of every institution she contacted to poison my reputation. Bobby looked between his mother and me, his world visibly crumbling. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Harmony straightened her shoulders, her mask sliding back into place. Everything I did was to protect this family, to protect you from making a mistake that would have ruined your marriage. The admission hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. You did it, Bobby whispered. You actually did it. I saved your marriage, Harmony said coldly. That woman would have left you the moment she got that fellowship. I protected you from abandonment. Taylor stood up abruptly. I can't listen to this anymore. Heidi, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He walked out, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. The ethics board hearing was held in the university's main conference room. I sat in the witness section, watching Harmony enter with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who probably cost more per hour than I made in a week. Professor Griffin sat at the head of the long table, flanked by 4 other board members. She'd warned me that this wouldn't be easy, that Harmony would fight back with everything she had. This hearing will address allegations of professional misconduct against Dean Harmony Boyd, Professor Griffin announced. We'll begin with testimony from the complainant. I stood up, my legs shaky but my voice steady. My name is Heidi Boyd. I'm married to the respondent's son. Harmony's lawyer immediately objected. The complainant's relationship to my client creates an obvious bias and conflict of interest. Noted, Professor Griffin said. Please continue, Ms. Boyd. I walked them through everything, the fellowship application, Harmony's fake encouragement, the devastating rejection, and the discovery of her real recommendation letter. I presented the evidence methodically, screenshots, email records, documentation from other institutions. The respondent didn't just sabotage one application, I said. She systematically destroyed my reputation across multiple institutions while pretending to support me. Harmony's lawyer stood up. My client was exercising her professional judgment based on legitimate concerns about the complainant's character and suitability. What legitimate concerns? Professor Griffin asked. The lawyer shuffled through her papers. Dean Boyd observed troubling patterns of behavior that raised questions about Ms. Boyd's integrity and professional conduct, such as manipulation of family relationships for personal gain, dishonesty about her true intentions regarding the fellowship, and a concerning pattern of... That's enough, Professor Griffin interrupted. Do you have documentation of these alleged behaviors? The lawyer hesitated. My client's professional observations and judgment. Documentation, counselor, not opinions. The documentation speaks for itself in the recommendation letter. Professor Griffin turned to Harmony. Dean Boyd, you're required to testify under oath. Do you swear that the contents of your recommendation letter were based on factual observations? Harmony stood up, still maintaining her composure. I swear that everything I wrote was based on my professional assessment of the complainant's character and suitability for the fellowship. And yet you showed Ms. Boyd a completely different letter before she submitted her application? That was a draft. I revised my assessment after further consideration. Further consideration of what, specifically? Harmony's pause lasted too long. Additional observations of her behavior and motivations. Professor Griffin opened a thick folder. Dean Boyd, are you familiar with the digital files recovered from your university computer? The color drained from Harmony's face. I don't know what you're referring to. Files containing detailed personal information about students, faculty, and staff. Information that goes far beyond professional assessments. Professor Griffin pulled out several documents. Files that include financial records, personal relationships, and what appear to be strategic plans for influencing or controlling individuals' careers. Harmony's lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but Harmony waved her away. Those files contain confidential university business. University business that includes your daughter-in-law's bank statements, her husband's employment history, her personal correspondence with friends and colleagues. The room was dead silent. I could feel the other board members' shock radiating across the table. Dean Boyd, Professor Griffin continued, we've identified 12 individuals whose careers were negatively impacted by your actions over the past 15 years. Would you like to explain why you systematically targeted people who posed no threat to university operations? I protected this institution. You protected your own position by eliminating anyone you perceived as competition or a challenge to your authority. Bobby's voice came from behind me. I'd like to testify. Everyone turned. He was standing in the back of the room, looking like he'd aged 10 years since Sunday night. Mr. Boyd, you weren't scheduled to appear today, Professor Griffin said gently. I know, but I need to say this. He walked forward, his eyes fixed on his mother. I've known my whole life that my mother was controlling, but I thought it was just overprotectiveness. I never imagined she was capable of this. Bobby, don't, Harmony said, her voice cracking for the first time. She admitted it, in front of our whole family. She said she destroyed my wife's career to protect me. She said Heidi would have left me if she'd gotten the fellowship. Bobby's voice was getting stronger. My mother decided my wife was a threat to her vision of our family, so she destroyed her dreams. That's not, Harmony started. It is exactly what happened. And if she did it to Heidi, she did it to all these other people too. Professor Griffin looked at Harmony. Dean Boyd, do you have anything else to say in your defense? Harmony stood there for a long moment, her perfect composure finally crumbling. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I did what I thought was necessary. Necessary for what? To maintain order, to protect what mattered. By destroying innocent people's careers? Harmony lifted her chin, and for a moment the mask was completely gone. What I saw underneath was cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. I have no regrets about protecting my family and my institution from people who would have damaged them. The hearing ended 20 minutes later. As we filed out, Harmony walked past me without a word. But I caught her eye, and in that moment, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't sorry. She was just sorry she'd been caught. The university's decision came down 3 days after the hearing. Professor Griffin called me personally to deliver the news. Harmony's tenure has been revoked, effective immediately, she said. She's been terminated for cause, which means no severance, no benefits, and her pension is under review. What about the other victims? The university is reaching out to everyone affected. They're offering to write corrective letters, provide new recommendations, and in some cases, financial compensation for damages. I hung up and stared at my phone. It was over. Harmony had finally faced consequences for her actions, but the victory felt hollow when Bobby walked through our front door that evening, looking like a ghost. It's all over the news, he said, slumping onto our couch. Local stations, academic journals, social media, everyone's calling her a monster. Bobby. She is a monster, isn't she? He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. My mother destroyed people's lives for sport, and I never saw it. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? All those times she made snide comments about people, all the careers that mysteriously stalled around her, all the students who just disappeared from programs. He rubbed his face with his hands. I think part of me always knew, but I didn't want to see it. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, Bobby spoke again. I don't know how to forgive you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You lied to me for weeks. You went behind my back, enlisted my friends, destroyed my family. I know she deserved it, but you lied to me. I tried to tell you, no, you didn't. You made the decision to destroy my mother without ever giving me a choice in the matter. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but he was right. I had lied. I had gone behind his back. I had chosen revenge over trust. I'm sorry, I said. I know you are, but I don't know if sorry is enough. The next morning, Taylor showed up at our door with a suitcase. Can I stay here for a while? He asked. I can't be in the same house as her anymore. Of course, I said, stepping aside to let him in. What did she say when you told her you were leaving? That I was being manipulated by you, just like Bobby was. That I'd regret choosing sides against family. Taylor dropped his bag and looked at me. But you are family, Heidi. You've been more of a mother to me these past 2 years than she ever was. Bobby emerged from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. Hey, buddy, you okay? No, Taylor said honestly, but I will be. We all will be. That afternoon, Paige called. I wanted to thank you, she said without preamble. For what? For having the courage to do what I couldn't. I've been living in fear of her my entire life, and you freed me from that. How is she handling everything? Paige was quiet for a moment. She's not. She's holed up in the house, refusing to see anyone or answer the phone. I think reality is finally hitting her. Do you think she'll ever admit what she did was wrong? No. She'll go to her grave believing she was protecting people from themselves. That's who she is. The fellowship committee reached out to me the following week. They offered to reconsider my application based on the corrected information, but I turned them down. Why? Alyssa asked when I told her. This is what you wanted. It was what I wanted before all this happened. Now, I don't know. The whole experience changed me. Changed you how? I thought about it. I learned I'm capable of things I never thought I was. Good things and terrible things. I destroyed a family to get justice, and I'm not sure that makes me a hero. You stopped a predator who was ruining innocent people's lives. I did, but I also lost my husband's trust, maybe permanently. I turned his brother against his mother. I tore apart a family that was built on lies and control. Maybe, but it was still a family. Zayn stopped by that evening to check on us. He'd been cleared of any wrongdoing in the investigation, but I knew he was still worried about the fallout. Any word from Harmony? He asked. Bobby shook his head. She's been radio silent since the termination. Paige says she won't even come to the door. What do you think she'll do now? I don't know, Bobby said. Start over somewhere else, probably. She's too proud to admit defeat. Will she be able to get another job in academia? Not likely. This kind of scandal follows you. As Zayn left, I realized something. Harmony had spent her career destroying other people's futures, and now her own future was destroyed. There was a certain poetic justice in that. But as I watched Bobby struggle with the wreckage of his family, I wondered if justice was worth the cost. Taylor appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over his shoulder. I'm going to stay with a friend tonight, he said. Give you two some space to figure things out. After he left, Bobby and I sat on opposite ends of our couch, the distance between us feeling like an ocean. So, what happens now? I asked. Bobby was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I nodded, accepting that some victories come with prices too high to celebrate. I'd gotten my justice, but I'd lost something precious in the process. The truth had set me free, but it had also set everything else on fire. And now we all had to live in the ashes.
Megan, as usual, you're as inconsiderate as ever. This trip was something my son and I had been looking forward to for ages. And since you had no hand in planning it, you really have no business being here. My mother-in-law snapped the moment my husband stepped away from the table. We were on a vacation that I had organized at my husband's request, but her hostility made it clear I was an outsider. At that point, I figured leaving early was the best option. Whatever they talked about once I was gone was no longer my concern. I'm Megan, a working woman with the flexibility to do most of my job from home. This means I spend a lot of time in the house. And my husband, Frank, always seems to be focused on impressing others while acting like he's above it all. He loves throwing money around for show but somehow never contributes to our household bills. He hid this side of himself when we were dating, but it became painfully obvious once we started living together. His biggest supporter is, of course, his mother, who never misses a chance to praise him. I expected her to dote on him like many mothers do, but she turned out to be harsh and dismissive of everyone else's opinions, especially mine. From the start, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son, and her snide comments never stopped. She seemed especially bothered by my financial independence and my ability to support myself. "You're still young. You should go work outside," she would often suggest, as if I weren't already working. No matter how many times I explained that I worked from home full-time, she refused to acknowledge it, dismissing my job as some part-time hobby. I'm sure she believes I just play games all day or neglect the housework. Frank knows full well what my work schedule looks like, but that hasn't stopped his mother from seeing me as a lazy, irresponsible wife. What's worse is that he never stands up for me. When she criticizes me in front of him, he just sits there in silence. I've asked him countless times to set the record straight, but he always says it's our issue to work out. He refuses to get involved, leaving me to handle the constant attacks alone. Once, when I pressed him for support, he angrily tossed divorce papers at me. The hurt and frustration were overwhelming, and for the first time, I seriously considered leaving him. But as difficult as marriage had been, the thought of divorce felt even more terrifying. I've come to realize that my husband constantly prioritizes his mother over our relationship, which is beyond frustrating. Still, I know I need to find a way to handle her expectations and comments without making things worse. I didn't agree to a divorce, not because my feelings for him remained intact, but because it seemed more practical to stay. He seems convinced I'm still head over heels in love with him, which only boosts his arrogant attitude. It's the kind of arrogance that's charming in a child but utterly repellent in an adult. Over time, I've learned to tune out his conceit and brush off his behavior. Another reason I hesitated to push for divorce was our living situation. Thanks to my husband's job, we live far from his parents, so we only see them once or twice a year. I thought I could manage with such limited interaction. Also, since I work with international clients, American holidays don't play a huge role in my schedule, giving me some flexibility. As for my husband, even though he has the opportunity, he rarely takes extended time off, so it's not like we spend a lot of time together anyway. Between that and the infrequent visits to his parents, I believed I could navigate this rocky situation. Then, after his first day back at work, he came home bursting with excitement, proposing a spontaneous overseas trip. He explained that some of his colleagues had gone on a 7-day international holiday, and he felt left out. He was proud of his spur-of-the-moment idea, oblivious to how impractical it all seemed, which left me stunned by his naivety. I hadn't traveled anywhere that year, but I suggested we stick to a domestic trip since he didn't even have a passport yet. I've always been good with languages, having studied abroad and traveled widely before we got married. Aside from English, I'm fluent in Spanish and have a decent command of Chinese. When my mom got hooked on Korean dramas, I even picked up a bit of Korean, though I'm still shaky on it. But regardless of my language skills, getting passports and planning an international trip isn't as simple as my husband imagined. I suggested we plan for something abroad during a more convenient season, like the summer or winter holidays, but he was insistent. Despite having zero travel experience, he picked the destination, took time off without confirming it with his workplace, and expected me to handle all the details. When I voiced concerns about the logistics of such a trip, he brushed them aside with, "English is universal." He was convinced we wouldn't face any problems, as if everything would magically fall into place. Just when I thought we might manage, my husband dropped another bombshell. His plan included bringing his mother along, and he simply assumed I would handle everything. Managing 2 inexperienced travelers was already daunting enough, but his casual remark about showing some respect for your elders and earning brownie points as a devoted wife felt patronizing and overwhelming. It wasn't framed as a favor I might do for them, it was more like a duty he expected me to fulfill. Still, despite my growing frustration, I found myself quietly making the necessary arrangements just as he had directed. In his mind, he was doing me a favor by orchestrating this trip, and it felt impossible to argue without seeming ungrateful. So, as he wished, I got to work. I handled everything, from securing passports for my mother-in-law and husband to booking flights, hotels, and planning a detailed itinerary. It was an enormous amount of effort, but I completed each task with precision, crafting what I knew would be a seamless travel experience. On the day of our departure, my mother-in-law, completely oblivious to all the work I had put in, was excited and chattered on about the luxury seating she assumed her son had arranged. She gushed over him, praising what she thought was his meticulous planning and generosity. Meanwhile, my husband basked in the compliments, shamelessly accepting credit for the trip's organization. Despite all my effort, I stood there in silence, realizing just how little recognition I would receive for the work I had done. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal, but maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal, but maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal, but maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "If you cause any more trouble or contact me again, I'll have no choice but to inform your company about your escapades. Being rejected by the dancer you admire would certainly be a blow to your ego," I warned. Frank, who had been aggressive up until then, responded with a subdued okay before hanging up. A few days later, I received a call from my ex-father-in-law. He revealed that he had divorced my ex-mother-in-law, which struck me as odd since we were no longer family. However, he felt compelled to share his findings about her true character. He had grown suspicious of her spending habits and discovered that she had drained his retirement savings on beauty treatments and cosmetic procedures. I was unfamiliar with these details and couldn't offer much insight, as I hadn't observed any noticeable changes in her. Perhaps the infrequency of our meetings had made any transformations less apparent to me. I even questioned my ex-father-in-law if he was sure the money was being used for beauty treatments. "She's spent a lot, but I don't see any visible changes. Maybe they're minor, only noticeable to her," I speculated. It seemed like a frivolous waste of money, leaving nothing behind. Naturally, my ex-mother-in-law turned to her son Frank for support. Since our divorce, Frank's financial situation has deteriorated. He's now drowning in debt and lost his apartment due to unpaid rent, forcing him and his mother to live in a rundown apartment. Despite their dire circumstances, his mother refuses to work and continues spending on beauty treatments. while Frank struggles to juggle his debts and cover their living expenses. From what I've heard, maintaining appearances remains their priority, even as their quality of life declines. Ironically, the beauty treatments have become less effective, and she now appears much older. As for me, I cherish the peace and freedom that comes with focusing on my work without interference. It's a refreshing reminder of the importance of living within one's means.
I've been happily married for 5 years, living with my thoughtful husband. We shared a close bond, eagerly anticipating the arrival of children, though we haven't had any yet. However, life took an unexpected turn following a recent incident, and I feel compelled to share this remarkable story. My husband is universally regarded as kind, a sentiment echoed by both my parents who hold him in high esteem. My sister, a dedicated career woman, has always focused primarily on her work, but she and my husband got along well despite her typically reserved demeanor. Recently, his work responsibilities intensified dramatically. He began returning home late and even started working on his scheduled days off. As a new team leader, he was often glued to his cell phone, coordinating with his team at all hours. While some might have found his sudden change in routine suspicious, I saw it as a commitment to his job, worrying instead about the toll it was taking on his health. Amid these changes, my sister decided to relocate for a new job opportunity that required her to furnish her new apartment. I planned to drive her to the furniture store on Saturday to help her out, but an unexpected call from my boss required my immediate presence at work, leaving me in a bind. Thankfully, that Saturday was one of my husband's rare days off. Despite his recent busyness, he graciously offered to help when he saw my predicament. It was slightly awkward for him to spend the day alone with my sister, but he agreed and even asked to borrow my car since his was in the shop. Grateful for his kindness, I went to handle the emergency at work. This was the first time my husband and sister had spent time together without me, and as I dealt with my responsibilities, I couldn't help but wonder how they were managing on their own. I hoped they were making the most of their unexpected day together and finding everything my sister needed for her new place. After resolving the issues at work, it was already dark by the time I checked my phone, planning to meet my husband and sister for dinner. However, I was caught off guard by a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end asked if I was a family member of David. Confused, I confirmed my identity as his wife. That's when the police officer delivered the shocking news. My husband had been in a car accident, and both he and his passenger, my sister, were unconscious. In a blur, I rushed to the hospital. Upon arriving at the emergency department, I gave my name and was quickly escorted to the intensive care unit. Through the glass, I could see my husband surrounded by machines, his body covered in bandages. My heart sank as I stood there, anxious about what the future held for him. Later that night, my mother arrived from far away to support us through this ordeal. As we waited anxiously, a police officer provided more details about the accident. He explained that David had been driving on a well-lit road when another car, which had run a red light, struck his vehicle. The driver of that car was also seriously injured and receiving treatment at the same hospital. However, this driver claimed that David's car had been behaving erratically before the crash, leading the police to investigate whether he might have fallen asleep at the wheel. After several tense days, both my husband and sister regained consciousness, and the doctors began conducting several tests. When my mother and I were called in for the results, the doctors delivered some difficult news. While they assured us that David and my sister would survive, they warned us that both might face lasting disabilities. Despite this grim prognosis, my mother and I felt relieved that they were alive. We clung to the hope that with rehabilitation, they could recover to some degree. Choosing to focus on the positive, we decided not to share the potential long-term impacts of their injuries with them. Instead, we surrounded them with encouragement and care, grateful for their survival. My mother took on the role of caring for my sister while I dedicated myself to looking after my husband. In the early days after the accident, he was visibly shaken, struggling both emotionally and physically. He was deeply troubled, not just by his own condition but also by the impact the accident had on all of us. As time passed, the man who had always been gentle and kind began to change. Frustration took hold, particularly regarding his impaired mobility and the ongoing medical treatments he faced. The reality of having to leave his job weighed heavily on his mind, And despite my efforts to support him, his irritability grew. I continued to visit him regularly at the hospital, determined to be there for him. During one of these visits, a police detective approached me with new information about the accident. He explained that there had been a leak in the brake oil of my car, likely contributing to the vehicle's erratic behavior before the crash. This revelation suggested that an accident might have been inevitable, either for me or someone else. Additionally, I learned that the woman who had crashed into us was also suffering. Her mother approached me to apologize, marking our first encounter since the incident. As days turned into weeks, my husband's frustration escalated. He grew increasingly resentful of my mobility and independence, angered by the contrast between our situations. His frustration often manifested in demanding behavior and outbursts of anger when I couldn't meet his needs as quickly or fully as he wanted. Objects were thrown, and harsh words exchanged over minor issues, such as my decision to step out to buy lunch. The demands and complaints grew more frequent and intense, adding to the strain of our situation. I empathized deeply with my husband's pain and frustration, but the reality of our situation required me to balance my time between supporting him and fulfilling my responsibilities. I needed to work to support us financially, stay updated on the police investigation, and coordinate with the hospital regarding his care. Despite the challenges and his occasional outbursts, I remained committed to helping him through his recovery, hoping that with time, patience, and care, we could navigate this difficult period together. However, I barely had a moment to myself anymore. My husband's demeanor had become increasingly difficult to manage, leaving me feeling cornered by the escalating tensions. Similarly, my sister was grappling with her own frustrations, and our mother appeared visibly worn out from the strain. I learned that my sister was placing even heavier demands on our mother, who was already stretched thin from not working and caring for both of us. Whenever I couldn't visit the hospital, both my husband and sister became more despondent. Hearing from doctors that they might remain paralyzed despite ongoing rehabilitation efforts added to the stress. The issue of my car's brake oil leak soon came to a head. My sister confronted me, her tone accusatory. "I heard your car was leaking oil. You were supposed to maintain it. Because of your negligence, I can't work or return to normal. Mom's stressed and your husband is suffering. You're going to have to take care of us for the rest of your life." Her harsh words took me by surprise, prompting me to call our mother, who confessed that my sister had been in a distressed mental state for quite some time. Despite the tension, my concern for my husband drove me to the hospital, only to find that he was not in his room. I eventually found my husband in the common room, quietly sitting with my sister. The visiting hours were about to end, leaving them alone in the otherwise empty space. It was there that my husband coldly remarked, "If you had just taken the car in for inspection, maybe none of this would have happened." His glare was piercing as he added, "Yeah, and now you're the reason your sister and I are in this mess. The insurance will cover some of it, but you'll be taking care of us for the rest of your lives. Remember that." His words struck me like a punch, igniting a surge of emotions within me. Surprised and hurt, I responded, "Since when have you become so close to my sister?" "What do you mean by that?" He shot back, "You don't come around often, and your mom even texted your sister to visit since we're both stuck here and can't walk. What's wrong with talking to your husband?" The situation felt overwhelming, and it was clear that the stress and fear of our new reality were profoundly affecting everyone's emotions and actions. Feeling increasingly isolated, I sensed my husband and sister were aligning against me. With a hint of sarcasm, I tried to lighten the mood. "Right? You two haven't spent much time together before the accident, have you?" Ignoring my tone, my husband replied, "What are you talking about? We're discussing you taking care of us. And you know that." My sister avoided my gaze but nodded in agreement, as if to confirm their expectation of my lifelong support. I hadn't anticipated a straightforward answer from either of them, but I pressed on, hoping to make them see my perspective. Switching topics, I casually mentioned, "I wonder how the person who hit your car is doing now." "How should I know?" My sister retorted defensively. "She hit us when the light was red. It's just unbelievable." "That's right. You can't imagine how terrifying it was," my husband chimed in. "We need to make sure we get compensation from her. I was so close to getting a promotion too." As their complaints continued, I realized it was time to clarify some facts. "There's something you both need to know. First off, I had my car inspected just before the accident," I said. "Oh, did you?" Then the dealer should be sued. There's no way they didn't know the brake fluid was leaking. My sister quickly interjected. That's right, I agreed. After the accident, the police contacted me to examine the car and determine the cause. They wanted to check my drive recorder, but that old recorder doesn't capture sound and doesn't start recording right after an accident, so it's not very useful. My husband dismissed my explanation. That's where you're wrong, I corrected him gently. You didn't know that I replaced the old drive recorder with a new one, did you? My sister looked up in surprise. What? I also installed an additional camera inside the car, I continued. Her face grew increasingly pale as I spoke. The new drive recorders can start recording with even the slightest shake of the car. The police have already contacted me about the data they've obtained. My husband's expression shifted to confusion, while my sister appeared so pale that she looked ready to collapse. Facing them directly, I confronted her. You were up to something, weren't you? What exactly did you do to the car? Why are you addressing my sister like that? My husband panicked, his voice shaky as he grappled with the implications of my words. You talked to her as if she were your girlfriend. I reminded him. I told you that a slag vibration would activate the recording, and it captured many intimate moments between you two. My words left him speechless, and the color drained from his face as I revealed how the police had inquired about the woman in the car with him. It was painfully clear now. His affair with my sister had been exposed. You've been deceiving me all this time. I confronted them, the revelation hitting hard. My husband, cornered and desperate, began to deflect blame onto my sister. Linda isn't the only one at fault here, he stammered. Just then, the mother of the woman who crashed into my car entered the room. I had invited her, hoping for some resolution or understanding. Don't you have anything to say to her? I challenged my sister, who recoiled at the sight of the distraught woman. Wow, who's this? My sister exclaimed, taken aback. She's the mother of the woman who crashed into you, I explained, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. My husband fell silent, finally realizing who she was as I continued. And she's also the mother of Marilyn, the woman who was your victim. At the mention of the name Marilyn, both my husband and sister went pale, panic washing over their faces. What is this? Do you know the woman who was driving the car? My sister demanded, her voice trembling with shock and confusion. My husband, at a loss for words, looked utterly defeated. That's when I decided to lay everything bare. She was having an affair with David. He promised her a divorce but never followed through. When Marilyn falsely claimed she was pregnant to manipulate him, David told her to get an abortion and cut off contact. Devastated and seeking revenge, Marilyn targeted me, aiming to hurt me through you. I connected the dots of this malicious cycle spurred by deceit and betrayal. So you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, I concluded, the weight of the situation settling over us. I can't believe something like this has upended our lives, my sister murmured, the magnitude of the betrayal dawning on her. I looked at them, my voice quiet but firm. No matter how much you cry or scream now, it changes nothing. This tragedy wasn't the result of an innocent bystander's actions. It was woven through a web of lies and vengeance that you both were part of. The room fell silent, the harsh truth echoing among us as we faced the painful consequences of their actions. Pouring all my emotions into my words, I made sure they understood the gravity of what had happened. You were carrying on an affair behind my back, and Linda, you tampered with the brake fluid of my car, intending to hurt me. Yet ironically, you ended up in the accident yourself. I am the true victim in this mess, I explained, bitterness clear in my voice as I revealed the depth of my disillusionment. I had contemplated not pursuing a divorce if you had shown even a hint of remorse during your hospital stay and honestly explained everything. However, you never once expressed any regret. Instead, you treated me with contempt. Pausing to let that sink in, I reminded them, do you remember how we jokingly filled out those divorce papers right after we got married? I never thought I'd actually use them, but today I filed them. So, you're no longer married. This is goodbye. With that, I left the dark, quiet hospital, feeling a profound sense of liberation, expressing all the pent-up resentment had freed me in a way I anticipated. Yet the aftermath of this revelation was not without its consequences. My mother was deeply shocked by the entire ordeal. The betrayal by my sister pained her, and the realization that she would have to care for her physically disabled daughter alone was overwhelming. While I had severed my ties with David and Linda, I couldn't bear to leave my mother to handle everything on her own. To help alleviate some of the burden, I approached the woman responsible for the accident, facilitating the necessary apologies and discussions about compensation, ensuring my sister, who was inadvertently involved, would be taken care of financially. This was the least I could do to prevent my mother from being overly burdened. 3 years have passed since that tumultuous time. My ex-husband and I are now divorced, and I've moved on. But the scars from those revelations and the weight of my decisions linger, a constant reminder of the complexities of relationships and the unexpected turns life can take. Now, I'm living on my own. During my marriage, David and I were perceived as a close couple, so our divorce shocked my coworkers. Afterward, I noticed an increase in attention from male colleagues, which I attributed to the notion that divorced women might appear more approachable or intriguing to some men. Despite this newfound attention, the lingering image of my ex-husband made dating unappealing to me. Instead of pursuing romantic relationships, I channeled my energies into advancing my career. I diligently studied for a certification exam and enrolled in an online business school that I could attend after work. I had never envisioned myself pursuing such a path. I never envied my sister, the career woman, and never thought I'd aspire to be one. Yet there I was, naturally gravitating toward this new goal. Life certainly has its twists. Since then, my ex-husband has moved back in with his parents, but it seems he has become a burden to them. His relatives blame him for his poor behavior and the way he treated me, and I've heard he's not doing well mentally. He's been acting out violently, causing trouble for those around him. My sister also returned to her parents' home, but her mental state has deteriorated further, and she continues to exhibit selfish behaviors. My mother, worn out from the ordeal, used my sister's savings and the accident compensation to place her in a care home. She consulted me before making this decision, and seeing no reason to object, I told her to do whatever she felt was necessary. Navigating these changes, I learned to adapt and focus on my personal growth, realizing that sometimes the most challenging situations lead to unexpected paths and new beginnings. At one point, I feared I would end up caring for both of them for the rest of my life, a prospect that felt like servitude. However, everything changed when I passed the certification exam I had been working toward. This achievement led to a transfer to a department where I could effectively utilize my new skills. During this period of professional growth, I grew close to the instructor of the online business school I attended. Soon, we began to plan a future together. Unlike my past relationship, he isn't just kind to everyone, he shows a special kindness toward me. For instance, if I'm working late, he makes it a point to come home early and prepare dinner for us. This thoughtful gesture means the world to me, and I've come to cherish these moments of simple happiness. Now, as I head home after a long day, I often find myself smiling at the thought of seeing him. I look up at the stars, grateful for the turn my life has taken, and feel eager to return to the warm home we've built together. I was recently taken aback to discover that a significant fire had occurred at Ever Trust Company, where my husband Richard works. It felt as though I had been hit over the head with a heavy weight, my heart racing with concern. I quickly dialed Richard's number, fervently hoping he was unharmed. When the phone rang and his voice finally came through, a wave of relief washed over me. "Where are you? Are you safe?" I asked, my voice rising in volume from anxiety and relief. To my surprise, Richard responded with irritation, his tone sharp. "What's the matter with you? You're so loud. I'm at work. Don't call me while I'm working." He'd abruptly hung up, leaving me confused and unsettled. While he didn't appear to be directly involved in the fire, his dismissive reaction was troubling. "My name is Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. Nursing is a significant part of my life. I married Richard 4 years ago, just as I was nearing the end of my 20s. We met through a mutual friend and quickly connected, leading to what I thought was a blissful marriage. We've been living in company housing provided by his employer. Despite not having children yet, I remain hopeful about building a happy family with Richard. He can be self-centered at times, but he's generally a kind and loving man who makes me feel secure. Recently, however, he seems overly preoccupied with work, often bringing tasks home even on his days off, which leaves him visibly exhausted. Richard's detachment has seeped into our evenings. After dinner, he often slumps on the sofa, ostensibly watching TV, but he's mostly fixated on his phone, using the television as mere background noise. Whenever I try to engage him in conversation, his responses are brief, typically just a yeah or an oh, which makes me question whether I've done something to upset him. This recent shift in his behavior is puzzling and concerning. Choosing to believe that Richard is simply overwhelmed by his demanding job, I decided to help ease his burden. I committed to making sure he had a warm lunch and a hearty dinner waiting for him every day, preparing nutritious meals to support him through his long days. Just as I was settling into this routine, an unexpected change threw everything into disarray. A colleague called the day before, asking if I could swap my night shift for a day shift. This sudden change meant I would be home in the evening, and I planned to inform Richard about it amid the chaos of my new schedule. I managed to email Richard about the shift change on the day itself, letting him know not to worry about dinner since I would prepare it once I got home. Strangely, I didn't receive a response. I figured he was swamped with work, so I focused on my duties. Even after my shift ended, there was still no word from him. This was unusual. Richard typically replied promptly to my messages during his breaks, often using emojis to keep the tone light. But this time, he had only read my message and didn't respond. I began to wonder if he was buried under work or if this silence signaled something more concerning, a shift that can sometimes happen after years of marriage. Feeling a bit down, I stopped at the supermarket on my way home. Despite the cold weather, I was determined to make a warm one-pot meal for us. I picked up all the necessary ingredients, ready to start cooking as soon as Richard walked through the door. However, he didn't come home at his usual time of 6:00 p.m. The hours dragged on, and by the time he finally arrived at 9:00 p.m., I felt a mix of relief and worry. As he entered, I greeted him, trying to keep the mood light. "Welcome back. You're home late. Did you have to work overtime?" I asked, my voice tinged with concern, hoping for a simple explanation. "Yeah, but did you really have to switch to day shift so suddenly?" Richard replied as he walked into the kitchen. I nodded, sensing the tension. "Yes, a coworker had an emergency and I was late in telling you about the change," I explained. "I see. I guess you couldn't help it," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But it's a bit annoying that you only informed me today. I might have made plans to go out for a drink or something." "You're right. I'm sorry," I said, feeling the weight of his disappointment. I replied as I turned on the stove to heat the pot. "Oh, you haven't eaten yet." Richard noticed the setup. "No, I thought I'd wait for you," I said, hoping he'd appreciate the gesture. "Well, thanks, but next time you don't have to wait for me," he said. His words stung a little. I had hoped for a cozy evening together. I sighed quietly as I waited for the pot to boil. Once it started to simmer, I served up Richard's portion, followed by mine. I was famished after waiting all evening, and the hot pot was delicious. I began to savor each bite, but then I noticed that Richard wasn't eating much. "What's wrong? You don't seem to be eating," I remarked. "Oh yes," he muttered, looking distracted. Then he admitted, "I worked late, and a junior colleague bought me a rice bowl at work, so I'm not hungry." But you should have told me that earlier," I replied, feeling a mix of disappointment and frustration. "You could have sent a quick message before I started cooking." I think Richard sensed my irritation because he quickly suggested, "Okay, then put my portion in the fridge. I'll eat it tomorrow morning." He tried to lighten the mood, but the atmosphere was already strained. After a few minutes of silence, Richard got up from the couch and suddenly announced, "I'm going for a walk." His abrupt decision to leave the house after our interaction felt unusual, leaving me puzzled about what was going on with him lately. When I expressed my concern about his sudden urge to walk, Richard explained, "I haven't been getting enough exercise lately, and with all the late work hours, I just need a change of pace." He began preparing to head out, leaving me feeling hollow as I sat alone at the dining table with the hot pot in front of me. Eventually, I decided to put my portion in the fridge, feeling slightly overstuffed. I realized that Richard and I hadn't spent much quality time together lately, so I suggested joining him for a walk, hoping it might provide an opportunity for us to reconnect. However, Richard declined my offer. "It's not good to move around right after eating. Besides, I need to take a long walk alone tonight," he said before leaving the house by himself. His behavior struck me as odd, and driven by a nagging instinct, I discreetly followed him from a distance. Despite the cool evening air, Richard walked with an unusual spring in his step. He eventually stopped near a park quite a distance from our home, where he seemed to be waiting for someone, frequently checking his phone. A few minutes later, a car pulled up and Richard strolled over, chatting casually with the driver. Curiosity got the better of me, and I moved closer to get a better look through the car window. Inside sat a woman with long curly hair and shiny lipstick, laughing joyfully as Richard climbed into the passenger seat. The sight felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't shake the thought that he might be having an affair. Just as I was processing the scene, the car drove off with them, leaving me standing there, stunned and struggling to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Not long after, Richard texted me, claiming he had unexpectedly run into an acquaintance and would be home late. His explanation felt far too convenient, and deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The trust I had in him began to waver. My trust in him was shaken as I struggled to comprehend the reality of the situation. He had claimed he wasn't hungry because he had already eaten, yet it was past 3:00 a.m. when my husband finally came home. He stumbled in, seemingly tipsy, and headed straight to the kitchen for a glass of water, completely unaware that I was awake. Since that night, he had often stayed late at work, especially when I was on the day shift. Synchronizing our days off had always been a challenge, but now it felt nearly impossible. Recently, he was not only working late but also putting in hours on what were supposed to be his days off. I couldn't shake the suspicion that he might be meeting the woman I had seen with him that night. Driven by doubt, I began searching for detective agencies online. After some digging, I submitted an investigation request to the most reputable one I could find. I felt guilty for going behind his back, but I reasoned that if the investigation cleared him, I could fully trust him again. Waiting for the results was excruciating. My husband remained as reserved as ever, and every time I looked at him, the image of that woman haunted me. I was desperate for clarity. Then an unexpected event occurred. It was a busy Saturday at the hospital where I worked, and my husband was supposedly working on his day off. As I focused on my tasks, trying to push aside my personal issues, the distant sound of fire truck sirens caught my attention. The noise grew louder and more urgent, and soon it wasn't just one fire truck, but several speeding by. A sense of unease crept over me, turning into worry as two of my colleagues returned to the ward with grave expressions. They were discussing an emergency, a large fire nearby. "You mean the fire?" I asked, trying to catch up with their conversation. "Yes, that's right," they confirmed. "There's a major fire at Ever Trust Company." The shock hit me like a physical blow. Ever Trust Company was where my husband worked. An overwhelming sense of distress washed over me as I considered the danger he might be in. Learning that the fire was at Ever Trust filled me with immediate dread. I quickly explained the situation to my colleagues and rushed to call Richard, hoping against hope that he was safe. Despite the recent tension between us, I always made sure to see him off each morning, and now I dialed his number with a heavy heart, praying fervently that he hadn't been caught in the blaze. The phone rang, and when Richard's voice finally came through, it momentarily lifted my spirits. "Hello, Richard. Are you safe?" I asked, my voice louder than intended with relief. Instead of the reassurance I craved, his response was curt and irritated. "What's the matter with you? You're talking so loud. I'm at work. Don't call me while I'm working." Then the call abruptly ended. Confusion and anger surged within me. There was a massive fire with trucks dispatched to the scene. It was impossible for him to be working normally under those circumstances. His cold demeanor and strange response made me question whether he had even gone to work at all or if something else was happening. As my worry for his safety morphed into suspicion about his fidelity, I couldn't shake the thought of all those mornings I had seen him off. Was he using that time to meet someone else? By the time I reached home, my mind was made up. I needed to leave and start anew. As I began packing my belongings, I felt a mix of determination and sadness. I checked the mailbox and found that the results from the detective agency had arrived. It felt timely to take these with me as I left a house that no longer felt like home. My parents came over to help me pack, and I arranged for a moving contractor to expedite the process. As I worked amid the boxes, it struck me that Richard was probably unaware I knew the truth about his affairs, likely spending time with his lover at that very moment. I packed up my furniture and the appliances that had been with me since my sable days. The room quickly emptied, becoming the hollow shell of the home it once was. Standing there, looking around at the nearly bare space, I realized how much I had changed and how necessary it was for me to move on from this chapter of my life. I felt completely detached from the life I once led in that house. With resolve, I moved my belongings to my parents' home and began searching for a new place to live on my own. The next day, Richard finally reached out, his voice laced with confusion and annoyance. Hey, what's going on? Most of your stuff is gone. I've moved out, I replied calmly. What the hell were you thinking? When are you coming back? What about my food? What about the house chores? His questions revealed everything. He was solely focused on how my departure affected him. Hearing his words stunned me, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Is that all you think about when it comes to me? I asked, disappointment heavy in my voice. Our conversation brought back memories of the fire at his company, a day he claimed to be tied up at the office, yet he seemed far too carefree given the circumstances. Why don't you find another woman to handle all that? I challenged, struggling to keep my composure. What are you talking about? He replied, genuinely confused. You were with a woman named Kelly today, weren't you? Huh. What are you talking about? I was working at the office. Oh, at the office? How long did you work today? My suspicion intensified as the day grew busier, even though I was supposed to be off. I ended up working late into the evening, which made Richard's bewilderment over my move seem all the more suspicious. That's why I was so surprised that you moved out, he said, trying to sound genuinely confused. Stop lying already, I shot back sharply. You lied about going to work, didn't you? I wasn't lying. I was working. What's going on? His voice wavered between frustration and confusion. How could you work late when there was a fire at your office during the day? When I called you, several fire trucks were dispatched to your company. They were there to extinguish the flames. That's why I called. I wanted to know if you were okay. You told me not to call you while you were at work, acting as if there was no fire. His silence spoke volumes, confirming my deepest doubts. The reality of the situation settled in, exposing the fissures in our relationship and making the distance between us feel more pronounced than ever. Armed with irrefutable evidence from the detective agency, I knew I had the upper hand. There's no way you can escape this, I stated firmly. From now on, all communication will go through my lawyer. As expected, he pleaded for forgiveness, repeatedly apologizing for his betrayal. But my feelings for him had faded long ago. I'm sorry, but there's no fixing this. I'm hanging up now, I said, cutting off any further attempts at reconciliation. I promptly met with my lawyer to demand a divorce and alimony. With solid evidence in hand, the proceedings moved swiftly, and the divorce was finalized. Richard, along with his accomplice from work, a junior colleague, was ordered to pay a significant amount in alimony. Their affair not only had personal repercussions but professional ones as well. Once the news spread throughout the company, especially under the dramatic circumstances of the fire, it sparked widespread disdain among their peers. Both Richard and his affair partner faced cold stares and harsh judgments, a social penalty that visibly embarrassed them. Meanwhile, I settled into a new apartment, embracing my independence. The stability of my nursing career provided me with comfort, allowing me to take things slowly without rushing into another relationship. I reveled in my newfound solitude, appreciating the peace that came with it. Discovering my husband's affair, especially amidst the chaos of the fire, felt like a harsh twist of fate, yet it expedited the inevitable consequences he deserved. Now, as I adjusted to my single life, I looked forward to the possibility of meeting someone genuine in the future, without any rush, savoring each moment as it came. This is the last gift I will ever give you, my husband declares coldly, sliding the divorce papers across the table. He confesses his plan to marry someone else, reducing me to nothing more than a financial asset he's used for years. The man I've shared so many intimate moments with has revealed himself to be utterly despicable. This marks the beginning of my tale of vengeance. My name is Helen, and this year, as I turn 52, I face a pivotal moment. Tomorrow isn't just another day. It's the end of a long period of debt that I will finally settle. My husband Scott and I have poured our sweat and tears into our life together since we tied the knot 22 years ago when I was 32 and he was 34. He owned a liquor store, a family business passed down from his late parents, while I worked in an office. We met through a mutual friend and quickly started dating, leading to marriage. Back then, my only worry was whether he'd expect me to help run the store. I was a financial consultant, advising individuals and businesses on insurance and investments. I earned a decent salary, loved my work, and was studying for a certification to further advance my career when Scott proposed. He assured me he supported my ambitions wholeheartedly. I know how hard you've been working for your certification, and I want to support you in any way I can, he said. He had enough staff to manage the store, so he encouraged me to chase my dreams. His support was crucial in my decision to marry him. He seemed genuinely kind and always in my corner. We entered our marriage with a clear understanding. He would manage his business, and I would focus on my career. Our future seemed bright. However, about a year into our marriage, things began to shift. One afternoon, while I was enjoying a rare day off, I decided to vacuum under the bed. The vacuum snagged on something, a pile of papers. We had only moved in less than 8 months ago, so the mess surprised me. I curiously picked up a crumpled sheet and smoothed it out. The bold header instantly caught my attention. Reminder of payment. Below that, an outstanding debt of $320,000 in Scott's name stared back at me. It wasn't $3,000 or even $30,000. It was a staggering, life-altering amount. My heart pounded as I tried to comprehend why he'd hidden this from me. As soon as Scott returned home, I confronted him. What is this debt? What's going on? He didn't hesitate. It's not what you think. This debt was left by my parents, he explained, his voice calm. It wasn't personal debt, but one tied to his liquor store, inherited alongside the business. The debt was secured against both the store's land and the house we lived in. Scott had no intention of renouncing the inheritance, no matter the risk. While it wasn't his fault, the debt was real and couldn't be ignored. This is a payment reminder, I said, pointing at the paper. Aren't you supposed to be making monthly payments? I do, he replied, though there was a hint of strain in his voice. But sales can be inconsistent, especially during slower months. That was the moment I realized our marriage and everything we built was on shaky ground, and that this secret debt would soon unravel everything. I can't cover the payments right now. I have to prioritize paying my staff, so I've asked the creditors to wait. Scott's explanation seemed reasonable at first, but the bold final notice on the reminder was hard to ignore. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry, he quickly added. Don't stress about it. The business is doing well overall. Look, we haven't been evicted or anything, right? Though what he said was technically true, the fact that he had kept this from me gnawed at me. I stared at him, my anxiety evident, but before I could process it further, he threw me a curveball. If you're so worried, why don't you help pay it off? You're earning quite a bit, aren't you? His suggestion sent a wave of unease through me. The store wasn't mine, and yet, in a marriage, aren't partners supposed to support each other? My debt is your debt too, he added abruptly. If my store went under, it would affect a lot of people. It's become crucial to the community. I couldn't deny that. His store was a cornerstone of the neighborhood, nestled in the suburbs where other shops and supermarkets were few and far between. He didn't just sell liquor, he offered fresh goods like meat and fish and even provided a home delivery service. I'd been to the store many times and I had seen firsthand how much the customers appreciated its presence. It wasn't just a business, it was a lifeline for many. Please, I need your help with the debt, he pleaded, his eyes sincere. I'll keep focusing on the business, but I can't do this without you. His dedication to his work was undeniable. The thought of the store closing wasn't just painful for him, it would also be a loss for the entire community. I felt the weight of the decision pressing on me. Being married means supporting each other through thick and thin, I reminded myself. If he was struggling, wasn't it only right for me to step in? Okay, I'll help, I finally said, though my voice felt heavier than usual. I'll put as much as I can toward the debt every month from my salary. You focus on running the store. I agreed, hoping this would stabilize things. After all, while I could help financially, the store was his responsibility to manage. At the time, I was relieved that he trusted me with something so important. But looking back, this was the moment everything began to change. 4 years passed since I started contributing to the debt, and in that time, Scott's late nights became more and more frequent. He would stumble in at all hours, reeking of alcohol. What kept you out so late? You smell like a bar, I'd ask, trying to mask my growing concern. Just had a few drinks with some customers, he'd respond casually, brushing it off. But with each late night, my worry deepened. Something was shifting, and I feared what might come next. When I asked, "Did you make this month's payment?" his response didn't come as easily as it should have. His tone was laced with condescension. "I did last week," he said. "You know the store relies on you. You better keep up with the payments," he added dismissively. At first, I brushed off these comments, thinking they were just the ramblings of a drunk. But as his demands became more frequent, they started to grate on me. It became clear that Scott genuinely believed it was entirely normal for me to shoulder his financial burdens. By the way, Benjamin just had his third kid, he mentioned offhandedly one day. Benjamin, his old high school friend, was also a business owner whose wife worked alongside him in their store. His comment made me reflect on our situation, and I finally voiced the question that had been lingering in my mind. "I've been meaning to talk to you," I said, trying to gather my courage. "Don't you think it's time for us to start a family?" Scott's reaction was cold and dismissive. "A baby? My business is just beginning to pick up, and we're still in debt. How can we even think of that responsibility now?" His firm stance stunned me. "But Benjamin has 3 children," I countered, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Surely we can manage one?" "His situation is different," Scott retorted sharply. "His parents are still around to help, and his wife is actively involved in the business. We're not in the same position." His words crushed my hopes. "So, until all your debts are cleared, we can't even consider having a baby?" I asked, seeking some form of clarity. "That's how it's going to be," he said bluntly. "If you make enough money and pay off the debts quickly, then I'll think about it." His smirk made my stomach churn, but it also fueled a determination in me. I was naively committed, driven by the desire to start a family, even if his demands were irrational. I threw myself into work with renewed dedication, pursuing additional qualifications, taking on promotional exams, and securing salary increases, all in the hopes of resolving the debt faster and finally starting the life I had envisioned. I had started to earn significantly more than most women my age, even making advance payments on Scott's debts. My efforts were relentless, fueled by a mixture of hope and desperation. The debt hung over us like a constant shadow, and before I knew it, I was 40. The dream of having children had slowly slipped away. Despite this, I comforted myself with the thought that I still had my husband Scott. He needed me, and I believed in our life together. That belief kept me content. As the years passed, Scott began coming home later and later. Sometimes he wouldn't return until the next morning, always with the excuse that he had been with a customer and lost track of time. He was working hard to keep the store afloat, or so he said. Seeing his supposed dedication, I felt compelled to continue supporting him. We were in this together, I thought, sailing toward a better future. The years rolled on, and finally, the day approached when I would make the last payment on the debt. All the sacrifices, all the luxuries I had foregone. Soon, I wouldn't have to hold back anymore. I could finally enjoy the money I worked so hard for. Reflecting on our marriage, I realized how much of our life had revolved around finances. We had never taken a real vacation or even enjoyed a nice dinner out. Now in our 50s, I hoped we could start enjoying those things. On the day the final payment was due, I took the day off work to prepare a special celebration. I cooked an elaborate dinner, complete with a bottle of wine and Scott's favorite chocolate cake. I set the table beautifully, eager to celebrate our newfound financial freedom together. As I stood back, admiring the set, I thought about how quickly the last 22 years had flown by. It feels like it's been a long time, but the last 22 years have gone by so fast, haven't they, honey? I remarked as Scott walked in. His head was bowed, and his shoulders were trembling. Was he crying from happiness? Or was there another reason behind his emotion? To my utter shock, he erupted into a laughter I had never heard before, cold, mocking, almost sinister. "What the hell is going on? Are you okay?" I asked, bewildered and alarmed. With an air of audacity, Scott looked me in the eye and made a shocking declaration. "You are dismissed now. I'm grateful to you for the past 22 years. Thanks to you paying off all my debt, I'm a free man. Great job. I don't need you anymore." His words left me stunned. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, genuinely confused. He pulled a document from his bag and slid it across the table. "This is my last present to you," he said smugly. The bold letters of a divorce petition seared into my vision. Proudly, he continued, "I decided to marry someone else, so you're no longer of any use to me. Thanks for being my cash dispenser until now." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Are you getting remarried? Have you been cheating on me this whole time?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. His smirk told me everything I needed to know. I asked, piecing together the puzzle of his habitual late returns, all under the pretense of work or social engagements, while I worked tirelessly to clear his debts. His smug expression didn't falter for a second. I'm not unfaithful, he said casually. I've already found my next wife. I wanted to divorce you and marry her, which is why I waited for you to finish paying off my debt. Tears welled up as the absurdity of the situation hit me. The lavish feast I had prepared blurred before my tear-filled eyes. Get the hell out of here, he snapped, thrusting the divorce papers at me. My anger surged, boiling my blood faster than any sorrow or despair could settle in. Okay, but you'll regret this, I forced the words out, determined not to let him break me. No, I won't, he sneered. Why would I regret divorcing an old hag like you? Old hag? I thought to myself, almost amused. If I'm an old hag, then you're an old fart. His delusional self-image was so ridiculous it actually helped me regain my composure. Taking the divorce papers in hand, I declared calmly, I'm going to take this with me for now. With a heavy heart, I gathered my belongings and walked out of the home we had shared for 22 years. The abrupt end to my marriage left me reeling. Alone at last, tears of emptiness and frustration streamed down my face. I needed closure and justice. Soon after, I consulted with my attorney to draft a proper divorce agreement and sent it to Scott. I'd also requested a background check on his new fiancée, determined to understand what I was up against. Not long after, Scott called me, his voice thick with fury. Hey, Helen, what the hell is this document? He barked. I could almost imagine his face turning a deep shade of red on the other end. It's a divorce agreement. What about it? I replied, keeping my tone calm and even. I know what it is, he spat, but what's this about a loan agreement? Why do I have to pay you back? His voice was filled with disbelief and anger, confused by the financial claims I had laid out. This isn't just about a loan, it's about the money I paid on your behalf during our marriage, I explained. He struggled to grasp the situation, protesting, You chose to make those payments out of your own goodwill? This is ridiculous. Why are you bringing all this up now? Because, I said, my voice steady, our circumstances have changed, and you'll face the consequences. I did it as your wife, I responded firmly, but if we're getting divorced, that changes things. It's only fair you repay me. The reality of the situation seemed to hit him then. He hadn't considered the financial implications when he asked for the divorce. Armed with my years of experience working in insurance and investments and my connections with top-tier attorneys, I was prepared. The amount he owed me, including interest, was over $360,000. I was adamant about getting exactly that amount back. When he saw the name of a well-known local attorney on the document, he finally grasped the seriousness of the situation. You know I don't have that kind of money, he protested weakly. Sell the store to fund it then. If that's what it takes, so be it, I suggested. His response turned desperate. If I do that, I won't have anything left. You're only 54, I pointed out. You can still find a job. It's time you figured it out, just like I have. My resolve was clear. I was determined to start my next chapter on my own terms, free from his debt and deceit. The conversation was going nowhere, and I was ready to end the call, but curiosity got the better of me. So, how's it going with your new bride-to-be? I asked casually. None of your business, he snapped back. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. His tone said it all. It sounded like things weren't going as planned. Good luck, I said, amusement still in my voice as I prepared to hang up. Wait a minute, he interrupted urgently. I've decided not to marry her. We can start over, he pleaded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Start over? Don't kid yourself. I don't want you, I yelled, finally losing my patience. I hung up, my head spinning with disbelief. Had I looked as ridiculous as him during our 22 years together? I had respected him once, watching him work tirelessly for his store and customers. But now, it was clear he was just a fool. The story of his remarriage had started innocently enough. He had flirted with a part-time university student named Elizabeth, saying, You're so cute, Elizabeth. Will you be my wife? She played along, jokingly responding, Well, I'd think about it if you made me a full-time housewife. But he took her seriously. The idea of marrying a man over 40 years her senior was nothing but a joke to her, until he began pressing her persistently. It got serious enough that her parents intervened and obtained a restraining order against him. Reading the private investigator's report, I laughed so hard I started hyperventilating. All those nights he'd come home late, spitting stories of working late at the store. It had all been a lie, and the truth was utterly absurd. I used to think he was slaving away for his business, but in reality, he was spending his nights at bars and strip clubs, hitting on younger women, boasting about his so-called charm. I'm surprisingly popular with young girls, he'd say, grinning smugly. I'm a salesman, so I have this approachable aura. I get along with everyone. The report revealed the sad truth. His delusions were laughable. He'd tell the girls, people often say I look young. Don't you think so? They cringed, but he remained oblivious. To him, I was just a source of money, and his distorted view of himself turned him into a ridiculous figure, nearly landing him in legal trouble. Ironically, he wasn't unfaithful, not because he was loyal, but because he wasn't appealing enough to find a mistress. The whole mess started when his friend Benjamin became a grandfather. Enviously, my ex declared he wanted a grandchild too. I sharply reminded him that he could hardly afford to think like that while I was clearing his debts. He was humiliated. Looking back, I'm relieved I didn't waste my golden years with him. After we divorced, there was confusion over property division, but he didn't fight the settlement. My lawyer had a reputation for being tough, and it made me wonder how someone as spineless as him had ever run a business. In the end, he had to sell his shop to pay me off. Just before the sale, all his employees quit, and his customers were outraged that he was selling the family business to settle a divorce. It sent shockwaves through our community, but many felt he got what he deserved. The whole ordeal became a local spectacle, almost comedic in its absurdity. Even if he hadn't sold the shop, the negative publicity would have run him out of business eventually. Selling before hitting rock bottom was probably the only smart decision he made. Still, the sale didn't cover everything, so he's stuck working part-time to pay me back. Occasionally, he still sends me messages, admitting fault and begging for a reunion. Even after blocking him, he tries from new numbers. My attorney warned him that if he contacts me again, we pursue a restraining order. Thankfully, the calls have stopped since then. Looking back, I realize how fortunate I am to have escaped a life tied to his failures and fantasies. His desperate chase after a youthful mirage not only embarrassed him but also alienated everyone around him. Now, as he continues his part-time work to settle his debts, I'm grateful for the peace and independence I've found. His story is a cautionary tale about living beyond one's means and the dangers of refusing to accept reality. As for me, guess what I'm doing now? I'm a marriage counselor. At 52, I joined a friend's matchmaking service, a complete shift from my previous career in finance and insurance. Back then, I helped singles manage practical life aspects that crave something more personally fulfilling. So, I took a leap into helping people find love. In my current role, I focus on helping couples start their relationships on the right foot, encouraging open, honest discussions about important issues like money and future plans. Our direct approach has resonated with clients and membership has soared. Having lived through my own ups and downs, I'm driven by a desire to help others avoid the mistakes I made. Though I earn less than before, the joy I feel from helping people build lasting relationships is immeasurable. Every day, I guide people toward happiness, and this work has become my new source of fulfillment. After separating from my ex, I discovered my own happiness, and now I'm helping others find theirs. Each day brings a new opportunity to make a positive impact, and this role has given my life a deep sense of purpose. Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca, your narrator. Today, I'd like to share my story. Like many of you, I've faced my fair share of challenges, particularly with my mother-in-law, Emma. She's the type who loves to take charge and frequently oversteps the boundaries that my husband, Anthony, and I have set. Despite our multiple warnings, we struggle to enforce these boundaries, allowing Emma to exert a considerable influence over our lives for quite some time. It's not that she was outright rude or openly disliked me, but she had her subtle ways of showing her discontent. She didn't hesitate to critique my personal style, and strangely enough, she didn't hold back on her comments about her own son either. The list of things she's done without our approval is extensive, but one particularly striking instance was our wedding. Emma took it upon herself to change everything, from the decorations and flowers to the cake. We managed to stop her from altering the venue, but for everything else, we had to either go along with her choices or incur financial losses. When confronted, her response was always that she believed she knew best and had superior taste. Her expensive preferences did little to mask her lack of respect for our choices, which was both insulting and frustrating. As for Anthony, he found it challenging to stand up to his mother. Cutting off contact was never on his radar. I tried my best to overlook her intrusions, and for a while, things remained stable. That was until Emma found a new way to assert her opinions. After years of saving, Anthony and I finally bought our dream home. It was perfect for us, and I took great care to decorate it in a way that reflected our personalities. However, Emma's reaction was far from pleasant. She criticized our choices and the way we'd styled the place, claiming it looked cheap and tasteless. She insisted we should have consulted her, but we made it clear that our decisions were final, and we loved our home just as it was. Despite her protests and offers to improve our space to her liking, we stood firm. Our home was a reflection of us, not her, and we intended to keep it that way. In sharing this, I hope not only to vent but to connect with others facing similar challenges. It's a reminder that while we can't control how others behave, we can choose how we respond and what we hold dear. I've never appreciated how forcefully Emma insisted we make changes based on her suggestions, but this time, Anthony and I were resolute in keeping her out of our decisions. Despite her relentless texts, calls, and unexpected visits, we held our ground. But Emma wasn't one to back down easily. She devised a more cunning approach to disrupt our peace. To celebrate finally purchasing our home after years of saving, Anthony and I decided to treat ourselves to a short vacation out of state. It had been ages since we'd been able to get away, and with a bit of extra money, it felt like the perfect opportunity. Our home was supposed to be empty during our trip, but a kind gentleman from our neighborhood in his 70s offered to keep an eye on it. He promised to notify us if anything seemed out of the ordinary, though we weren't expecting any trouble. Imagine our surprise when he called to inform us that he saw 4 women entering our house. Alarmed, we pressed for details, and one woman's description unmistakably matched Emma's. Confused and irritated, Anthony and I needed to understand what was happening. I called Emma directly to confront her. "Emma, what are you doing at our house? Our neighbor saw you and some people entering." She replied nonchalantly, "Oh, I'll be staying here for 2 weeks with my friends, just 4 of them. But don't worry, no wild parties or anything. We thought it would be nice to spend some quality time together. Plus, your house could use some looking after. Think of it as us house sitting for you." "But we're not even home. Why would you bring your friends over without us there?" I asked, bewildered. "Don't fret, I'll entertain them. And with the recent break-ins around your neighborhood, consider this us keeping your place secure. It's better this way, especially with all the valuables you and Anthony have. We wouldn't want anything to go missing now, would we?" Emma reasoned. While her justification had some merit, her approach was entirely uninvited and invasive. It was yet another instance of her crossing boundaries, disguised as concern for our new home. Her tone during our conversation left me feeling uneasy and suspicious. The casual way she mentioned house sitting felt too convenient, almost as if she had orchestrated this visit well in advance. The fact that she arrived with friends unannounced, knowing we weren't home, raised several red flags for me. It appeared she had used her key to enter our house, and I shuddered to think what could have happened if our neighbor hadn't noticed and informed us right away. I was grateful for his vigilance, but couldn't shake the feeling that my gratitude might be premature, as something unsettling loomed in my thoughts. I shared my concerns with Anthony, expressing how uncomfortable it made me that Emma was bringing strangers into our home. It just didn't sit right, and I struggled to understand her motives. Anthony seemed to take it in stride, believing it was fortunate that someone was looking after our home, which might deter burglaries. But my worries extended beyond the threat of theft. Emma's history of overstepping boundaries was well documented in our experiences with her, and this felt like another glaring example. He tried to reassure me, suggesting we address the issue with Emma once we returned home. He acknowledged that his reluctance to confront his mother had to change, especially given her recent actions. I understood his difficulty, knowing that Emma had raised him alone, but something had to give. I still felt anxious, not entirely reassured by Anthony's resolve. The following day, our neighbor's call only heightened my unease. He asked if we were still on vacation, and I explained Emma and her friends were at our house, supposedly to keep it safe. His next words sent a chill down my spine. He reported hearing a lot of noise coming from our home, not the usual sounds of someone living there, but more akin to renovation work. This unexpected news left Anthony and me speechless, grappling with the implications of Emma's actions in our absence. The situation was becoming increasingly alarming, challenging our initial perceptions and forcing us to confront the unsettling reality awaiting us upon our return. The revelation from our neighbor made everything fall into place. Emma, my mother-in-law, had often expressed her disdain for my decorating skills, deeming them tasteless while insisting she knew better. Her sudden silence regarding our decor after learning about our short getaway now felt ominously significant. Anthony speculated about the nature of the noises, wondering if there might have been a misunderstanding. However, the neighbor's observations of delivery trucks bringing in interior decoration items and the sight of Emma and her friends actively participating in the changes left no room for doubt. It turned out that one of her companions was a known interior decorator, a detail that only deepened our suspicions. The thought of Emma taking it upon herself to overhaul our home's interior without our consent was heart-wrenching. Both Anthony and I were in a state of disbelief and panic, grappling with the reality of her unwelcome intrusions. We expressed our gratitude to the neighbor for his vigilance and clarified that Emma's actions were unauthorized, underscoring the gravity of the situation. Overwhelmed by frustration and the urgent need to intervene, we knew we had to take action. I declared our vacation officially over. I couldn't enjoy another moment under the weight of this betrayal. Anthony shared my distress, apologizing for his mother's unrestrained actions and baffled by her choice to involve friends in this unwarranted project. Faced with no other option to halt Emma's endeavors before more damage was done, I contemplated involving the authorities. However, the thought of calling the police on Emma felt distressing for Anthony. Ultimately, the urgency of the situation outweighed our reservations. With Anthony's reluctant consent, I contacted the police to request a welfare check, citing the ongoing disturbances reported by our neighbor. Although this decisive action felt drastic, it seemed to be the only viable way to protect our home from further unauthorized alterations. When I called the police, I refrained from disclosing my suspicions but mentioned that my mother-in-law and her friends were staying at our house. Given the recent spike in burglaries, the police took my concerns seriously and conducted a welfare check. The feedback from the officers was nothing short of shocking. They reported that our home was in chaos, with ongoing demolition causing dust and damage everywhere. My carefully selected decorations were either mishandled or missing, a clear testament to their disregard for our belongings. Upon returning home, the reality was as bad as the police had described, if not worse. The images they shared revealed the extent of the havoc wreaked during our absence. Overwhelmed by the scene, I experienced an intense emotional breakdown, feeling inconsolable. Anthony, though deeply injured, managed to maintain his composure enough to engage directly with the police. He made it clear that his mother had massively overstepped by undertaking renovations without our permission, resulting in significant damage. The officers on site sympathized with our plight, acknowledging the financial and emotional toll of her unauthorized alterations. Faced with the choice of pressing charges for property destruction, Anthony and I agreed we wanted to hold Emma accountable for her actions. The police were supportive, offering to initiate the legal process on our behalf and promising to provide further documentation of the damage. In the meantime, we arranged for my sister to watch over the house until we could return. Anthony took charge, determined to ensure his mother faced consequences for her recklessness, while I unleashed every curse I could muster in my state of distress. I struggled to find the right words to express my feelings about Emma, but Anthony handled the situation with a level of calm and decisiveness that felt nothing short of heroic. He promptly arranged our return flights, determined to tackle the aftermath of Emma's intrusion as quickly as possible. Our immediate focus shifted to rectifying the chaos she had caused and beginning the arduous process of rebuilding what had been carelessly destroyed. Upon our arrival back in our hometown, we wasted no time and headed straight to the police station to take formal action against Emma's unauthorized renovations. We presented the officers with photographs showcasing our home's original state alongside the devastation she had inflicted. The officers were visibly appalled by the extent of the damage and suggested we pursue legal action for the havoc she had wreaked. My frustration and anger reached a boiling point as I became resolute in ensuring Emma learned a harsh lesson for her actions. Our decision to confront her at the police station where she was being held stemmed from a desire to face her directly and make her understand the gravity of her behavior. When we finally saw Emma, she responded with a feigned innocence and confusion, questioning why she had been incarcerated as if she were unaware of the chaos she had caused. Her lack of remorse, coupled with her insistence that she was merely helping us by imposing her tastes on our home, was infuriating. Anthony, equally incensed, challenged her delusion head-on, confronting her audacity and utter disregard for our wishes and property. Emma's defense dripped with entitlement as she asserted that her intentions were to enhance our home, completely oblivious to the personal and financial turmoil she had created. She even had the audacity to critique my taste, proposing to fix everything if released, unaware of the severity of her actions. However, our resolve was unyielding. We informed her that she would never be allowed near our home again, and that we were pressing charges for property destruction. It was in that moment that the reality of facing legal consequences seemed to dawn on Emma. Panic set in as she turned to Anthony, carefully trying to portray me as the villain for insisting on accountability and pleading for his intervention. Her desperate plea, however, fell on deaf ears. United in our decision, we were determined to see the legal process through, ensuring that Emma faced the repercussions for her unwarranted intrusion and alterations to our home. Watching her grasp the reality of her situation marked a pivotal moment in our stand against her overbearing and invasive behavior. Anthony unequivocally supported my stance, and as he spoke, I could see Emma's astonishment. "Mom, Rebecca's right," he asserted. "By transforming our home according to your preferences, you've disregarded our boundaries. It's time to face the consequences." After everything that had transpired, this was the final straw. Anthony firmly stated the breach of trust and respect that had occurred. Despite Emma's protests and her attempts to sway him with emotional appeals, he remained resolute. He emphasized the necessity of compensation for the extensive damage she had caused, highlighting the serious financial implications she now faced. When confronted with the reality of her actions and their consequences, Emma broke down. She hadn't anticipated the lawsuit or the significant dent it would make in her savings. Her tears and pleas for mercy were a stark contrast to her previous sense of entitlement. However, her claims of financial hardship did little to sway her decision. "You should have considered the consequences before taking such drastic actions," we countered. Her appeals for leniency, cloaked in claims of good intentions, were dismissed. Anthony and I recognized them for what they were: manipulation tactics. Our resolve remained firm, and despite Emma's tearful apologies and last-minute remorse, the damage to our home and our trust was irreparable. Leaving her at the police station, we returned home, ready to rebuild from the turmoil she had caused. Emma's release on bail and her subsequent uninvited appearance at our home only reinforced our decision. Once again, Anthony firmly delineated our boundaries, insisting on no further contact. Emma's desperate attempts to regain favor only confirmed the necessity of our actions in setting these boundaries and holding her accountable. Determined to protect our home, our peace, and our future from further disruption, we chose to remain in our damaged yet still habitable house. We awaited restitution through legal proceedings, and ultimately, the court ruled in our favor, mandating Emma to compensate us significantly. She narrowly escaped incarceration but was also ordered to cover our legal expenses. The judge expressed his disdain for her actions, reducing Emma to tears once more. However, any sympathy we had felt for her had long since evaporated. She was merely facing the consequences of her choices. Emma's social circle, including the friends she had involved in her scheme, quickly distanced themselves from her, unwilling to be associated with her follies. Following the court's decision, Emma approached us tearfully, appealing for forgiveness and lamenting her financial hardships, which had worsened due to the cessation of the financial support Anthony had provided. For years he had generously given her an allowance, but he decided to halt it in light of her destructive behavior and the legal troubles that followed. Despite her desperate pleas highlighting her dire financial situation, we remained unmoved. Anthony stood firm in his resolve, stressing the importance of facing the repercussions of one's actions. Emma suggested moving into our guest room as a means to reconcile and perhaps regain financial stability, but we unequivocally refused. Anthony made it clear that she was no longer welcome in our home or our lives, signaling a period of no contact to allow us to heal and reassess her place in our lives, if there was any place left for her. Emma's reaction to Anthony's stance was one of disbelief and desperation, culminating in an emotional scene on our doorstep. However, having witnessed her manipulative tactics firsthand, we were resolute in our decision to sever ties. In the months that followed, we experienced newfound peace. The absence of Emma's judgmental presence allowed both Anthony and me to embrace a more carefree and positive outlook on life. This ordeal prompted us to consider maintaining this distance permanently, hopeful for a future free of turmoil and interference. As we navigate this journey, we seek support and understanding, believing that this decision will lead us toward the fulfilling life we've always envisioned.